I'm going to talk about FI and FE today, and compare and contrast. So I've read out definitions of feeling from the Young book, but we're going to have a look at the introverted and extroverted forms and how that might actually manifest in people. So hopefully it's easier to understand the things that make sense to me, really. So I've said here feeling is creating a feeling narrative either within oneself, FI, or as part of a group, FE, and also that it can be either positive and harmonious or negative and disharmonious or a combination. So it's, an FE user, it's not all about, oh, this person is a people pleaser and harmony bringer. It's not, there isn't just one kind of harmony. If you think about music, there's also discordant harmony. We really call it harmony, but dissonance. There is the kind of bog standard harmony that's very common in Western music. And then there's also harmony that is a little bit more unusual that we don't tend to hear as much, but it is harmony nevertheless. So if somebody is concerned with creating harmony in the group because they are an FE user, it's really about being in control of dynamics, relational dynamics, understanding those on a deep level and being able to manipulate them. So like I said, it's not necessarily about getting along with other people. It depends what it is you're trying to create. I do like to think of it as like music. So creating music, creating harmony, music, or certain relationship dynamics within the group. And then if you're an FI user, it's the same thing, but it's within oneself. So I'm the type of person who likes this and holds this value, and they might seem contradictory to outsiders, but they're not contradictory to me because of XYZ reasons. So it's about rationalizing the harmony within you, rationalizing the relationships between different values, and taking out or adding to those to add to the harmonic narrative. So I've said here that F's feelers can suffer from feeling fake, either fake in their relationships or fake within themselves. Okay, so an example here would be like an FE user who was creating a certain harmonic relationship finds that when they look inside themselves, that same harmonic relationship doesn't exist. It's actually a different one. So they're creating something different on the outside to what they're creating on the inside. And I often see what I think of as FE users saying things like, oh, I'm just always people pleasing and I feel like I just want to get away. I want to go to a retreat and just be by myself and just be myself. So it's almost like, occasionally they look within and they find that they are disharmonious within themselves. And then similarly with FI users, the harmony that they're creating on the inside or the feeling narrative isn't being replicated in their outside relationships. And from time to time they might go, I'm such a hypocrite, I'm so fake, I have these values within me and I'm at loggerheads with everybody else, or I'm people pleasing or whatever. So I would say that FE users enjoy the process of growing the external harmony with them as a part of it. And I would say the FI users enjoy growing the personal harmony within oneself. In order to not feel depressed, you need to extrovert and introvert every single function. Okay, so this is about, so say an FI user has all of these values aligned. It's very organized within themselves, like kind of who they are, the harmony, the relationship with different aspects of their values. if they don't get to extrovert that, sometimes they are going to feel like a fake hypocrite. So, what I mean by that is they have to occasionally bring that into the outside world to give validation to the narrative they've created on the inside. And then I would say the FE users that are concerned with creating the feeling narrative externally, I think sometimes they need to look within themselves and say, okay, where am I not creating this great harmony for myself, within myself? And they need to do a bit of work on themselves and their own personal values. You create problems to solve, or you thrive on existing problems if your dominant function can tackle them. You might even push or break something just so you can repair it. The reason I can say this is because I imagine that I am an FI user. And a lot of the time, I observe people in conflict in relationships, in romantic relationships, in friendships, with work colleagues. And I find myself thinking, why would you even have relationships that were in conflict like that? Like, I would just prefer not to have those relationships. That was just so much easier to have no relationships rather than ones where you're always butting heads. But actually, an FE user thrives on that. They don't want to take themselves out of their relationships. They want to work with them to create the harmony or to get a better dynamic. They thrive on that. And then similarly, an FI user might feel like they're often in conflict with themselves. And as they try and refine this harmonious relationship between their personal values, and an FE user might look at an FI user and think, look, why don't you just get out more, have some real relationships? Why are you always beating yourself up? Why are you always obsessing about whether you're getting things right? Lay off yourself a little bit. And the FI user's like, well, how can I do that? I can't do that. I'm thriving on this. I'm becoming a better person because of this. So I would say that they both thrive on conflict. I don't mean in a toxic way, challenges, but the FE user, it would be between them and other people, or a group as a whole. And with an FI user, it would be challenges and conflicts within, problem solving within, that they thrive upon. I also just wanted to add, I've been thinking very much recently about the difference between being in a group and being with a friend all by yourself. Like, so there's just two of you. And I think there is a world of difference between being in the presence of one person and being in the presence of two or more people. So if there's two or more people, suddenly there's a group dynamic that's not at play when you're in a situation with just one person. So being with just one person and having a relationship with them, it can be very much an introverted process, where you get to bring more of your personal values to the table, and you really get to listen to, if they're an FI user, you get to hear their personal values, because they're okay bringing those to the table because you're bringing yours and there's no group dynamic to worry about. But if it's an FE user who you're dealing with, you get to hear about the values of the group. You don't necessarily feel the need to fit into those because you only have one person there. Somebody was talking the other day that I found really interesting about how do you know who is the head of your friendship group? And I thought to myself, I haven't been in a friendship group since school, All my friends are separate from each other. They barely know each other. They're all very different to each other. With one friend, I wouldn't talk about a certain subject, and with another friend, I'd talk about that subject. There's very different dynamics between me and my individual friends, and all of those friendships are very deep as well. And then as soon as there's another person in the room, we both, I've noticed that we both, our dynamic gets flattened a little bit to accommodate this other person, and the dynamic changing because there is now a group dynamic. And then lastly, I've said feeling is a rational function, therefore conclusions are constantly being formed. Yeah, so value judgments, we call it a decision-making function. It's not just about making big decisions in one's life, it's about coming to conclusions like gaining knowledge or understanding. So you're understanding the dynamics, and you're understanding the dynamics in relation to your personal values or the group's values, so you can then take the necessary action to change the dynamics. Right, I'm just going to take a few sound bites from psychological types about feeling. So this is about extroverted feeling. Even where it seems to show a certain independence of the quality of the concrete object, it is nonetheless under the spell of traditional or generally valid standards of some sort. I may feel constrained, for instance, to use the predicate beautiful or good, not because I find the object beautiful or good from my own subjective feeling, but because it is fitting and politic so to do, and fitting it certainly is, inasmuch as a contrary opinion would disturb the general feeling situation. So that's about, everyone else is regarding this as beautiful, so I'm going to regard it as beautiful too because I don't want to rock the boat. I think that's a very simplistic explanation. I would argue that an extroverted feeler could also come along and deliberately call something beautiful, not because they genuinely thought that it was, but in order to disturb the harmony. And that might be for bad reasons, but it could be just to change the harmony dynamic, to influence people in another direction. So I don't think FE is all about fitting in and people pleasing. I think it depends on the intention of the person. It's an effort to affect the dynamics of the group, and that's either by keeping it the same or improving it or changing it or damaging it. I could be wrong on that, but from what I've seen, people who I assume are FE users, they're not always great at maintaining social harmony. And a lot of the time I feel that they know exactly how to rock the boat and push the boundaries without actually being cast out of the group. But they have various reasons for doing so. And it says here, extroverted feeling strives to rid itself of subjective influences. So an FE user, in their striving to get away from their own personal whatevers, values or thinking or whatever, they're trying to understand the group dynamics, and they may push back against the group dynamics in order to understand it better, because in fact they are trying to rid themselves of the subjective, but it may look combative or confrontational, or like they're going against the grain. Okay, so it's mentioning here group valuations, objective values, tradition, generally known standards of value, church going, theatre, concerts, fashions. Yeah. But then, what happens when you're in a certain group and you're all in one accord? and then you go into another group and their values are completely different. Like, how do you, as an FE user, how do you handle that? I don't believe that FE users are necessarily sage and stoic enough to be able to get on with every single group. Like, group harmony is always at the forefront of their mind, even when it's with people who they disagree with. So again, I'd say they'd probably go into a situation like that and try to change the dynamics. They'd try and carry some of their group values into another group, or they would just concentrate on externally getting along with those people. But I wouldn't say that's necessarily just an FE thing. I would think that FI users would also just try and get along with people, because they didn't want the conflict. And it depends what their values are. If they were sort of trying to be more courageous, they might go around preaching different values to different groups, but their current value system might be telling them, just don't get in the ring. So it might be hard to tell, kind of. I think it would be hard to predict an F user's motivations, and hard to predict what their behavior might look like from one situation to the next. Something else about extroverted feeling. The extroverted feeling type, insofar as feeling is incontestably a more obvious peculiarity of feminine psychology than thinking, the most pronounced feeling types are also to be found among women. Now, there's a lot that could be said about that. I mean, obviously now, there doesn't seem to be any gender bias in personality type or MBTI or socionics. You readily get men identifying as Fs, like feelers, like high feeling, and same with women identifying as high thinking. And Jung said that thinking was more of a male domain. So there'd be a few options. I mean, Jung might be wrong, or maybe society has changed that much since then, that women are no longer socialized to be feelers, and men are no longer socialized to be thinkers. Or men nowadays who are identifying as feeling types are just way off and they're actually not. I don't really know about that. Okay, so it says here, as a result of education, her feeling has become developed into an adjusted function, subject to conscious control. Okay, so he's saying it's because of nurture rather than nature. So maybe all the guys who are identifying as feelers today actually are, because I don't think men are particularly socialized to be thinkers over feelers. In fact, it might be the other way around, especially now. This is a very interesting point. So Jung says, women who are extroverted feeling types, her personality appears to be adjusted in relation to objective conditions. Her feelings correspond with objective situations and general values. Nowhere is this more clearly revealed than in the so-called love choice. The suitable man is loved, not another one. He is suitable not so much because he fully accords with the fundamental character of the woman. As a rule, she is quite ununiformed about this, but because he meticulously corresponds in standing, age, capacity, height, and family respectability with every reasonable requirement. So FE DOMs choose partners based on optics, basically. That is a good choice for me because the tribe would think that that was a good choice for me, rather than he's perfect just for me. I mean, he's perfect for me as part of the tribe. Extroverted feeling this is, by the way. As regards to thinking, the feeling type can think very well, but every conclusion, however logical, that might lead to a disturbance of feeling is rejected from the outset. It is simply not thought. How many times do you see an extroverted feeler in a group dynamic that has a very specific harmony, and they're all in accordance with their values, and then you say to them, actually, that value that you've all got there, it doesn't make sense. It's actually this because this, and it's a logical explanation, and they'll just go, you're a bigot, or you don't know what you're talking about, and they just dismiss what you've said. Or if they like you and they want to maintain harmony with you, they'll go, that's bigoted, that's wrong, that's an archaic opinion. But they'll critique your opinion rather than assigning a label to you. They'll label your opinion, almost like saying, in our group, we view that sort of opinion in this way. But if they're angry, they don't particularly like you, they might go after you as a person. But if they're going after your opinion, it will be full of logical fallacies. It won't be in a logical way, kind of, well, that's wrong because of this. It'll be more to do with, that's wrong because that is not what we believe as a group. And they'll use lots of labeling of the various opinions, as if that's supposed to talk you out of it. Not that feelers should be derided from that, because we as humans are social creatures. It's so important for us to get along as humans. And I think it's more than that, it's so satisfying to have a community, and it's really important for mental health. And feelers have managed to evolve and adapt to cater for those personal needs and the needs of the tribe. So just because they're not as logical as thinkers, it doesn't make them less than or stupid, or they're surviving and thriving in their own way. I'll probably leave it there now. Thank you for listening.